In this video, I'm going to go through and show how to create the Initialized Patch. In fact, what I'm going to do is start with the Initialized Patch and then remove each element of the patch, and then we will rebuild it. And hopefully this will help address any questions that people have about how some of the components work together. And if not, then leave a question below this video and I will answer it. So first, let's just look at what's in the Initialized Patch. We've got Oscillator 1, okay? We have an envelope, envelope 1, and LFO 1, all right? So let's go ahead and remove Oscillator 1. And we see that Oscillator 1 was removed and also LFO 1 was removed. And so we'll look at what the connection is between those two in a minute. What's remaining is envelope 1. And the reason envelope 1 is remaining is because it's modulating the volume of lane 1. In fact, it's modulating the volume of all lanes 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's go ahead and set that to gate so that we end up removing envelope 1. So now we have no sound generators and we have no modulators. So in effect, we have no sound configured for the synth at this time. Now, one thing to keep in mind is we still have our global parameters, and the important one, or one of the more important ones to look at, is this tune. That's at -12. So just realize that if you're comparing this to other synths, their tuning may be set for 0, so you may hear a lower pitch coming from Silent 1 given the same MIDI note. So just keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and reconstruct the Initialized Patch. And what I'm going to do is first bring up the sound map for the Initialized Patch. So let me bring that up now. Okay, so this is a fairly simple patch. We have a single oscillator with a saw wave, and then you'll see that we have an LFO 1, and that's used by vibrato to modulate the detune amount. And then the output of oscillator 1 flows into the amplifier volume, which is modulated by envelope 1 with a fast attack, 0 decay, full sustain, and a fast release. And then that goes out to the main output, and there are no effects being used, so it's fairly simple. So let's go back and build this patch. Alright, so the first thing that I want to do is just go ahead and add oscillator 1. So now this brings up OSC1, oscillator 1, configured with its default values. So we have a single wave, okay? And if we select this, we can see that it is a saw wave, alright? And let's look at, it's not inverted, we're not using sync, and it's not restarting the phase on the note start. And then if we look at the phase sync, all those parameters are 0. We are not using any oscillator effects, and the mixer pan is in the center at 0, volume is at 100, width is at 50. And then if we look up here, our wave is set for the first wave, which is actually 1, so it's using slot 1 here on the wave table. And then the tune amount is set for 0, the detune is at 0, and the vibrato is 0. And just to point out, LFO1 is actually pre-wired in Zebra to modulate this detune amount based on the vibrato control here. So let me demonstrate that real quick. If I hold the note C down, I'll do that, and then I'll increase the vibrato amount. And you can hear the pitch fluctuating there based on that. Now, if I come over here to the LFO, I'll explain these controls in a separate video, but if I increase the rate, that'll control how quickly that modulation of the detune amount occurs based on that vibrato control. So let me increase the rate of the LFO. Okay, so you get the idea. Alright, so that takes care of explaining the default oscillator settings with the LFO, modulating that detune amount. So let me return vibrato to 0. And now what we want to do is add ENV1 so that it modulates the volume on lane 1. So let me select the amp envelope here and set it to ENV1. And now we see envelope 1 has been added to the modulator pane on the synthesizer. So now its default settings, basically a 0 attack, a 50 decay, sustain is at 80, and release is at 15, and then there's some velocity scaling occurring here. With these settings now, if I play a note, it sounds like that. It's very similar to the gate. In fact, it sounds almost identical to me. So let me walk through these envelope settings quickly, just to review the ADSR envelope with you, just to help clear up any questions that may be lingering about how the envelope works. So if I bring decay all the way to 0, release all the way to 0, we can ignore this velocity scaling for a moment. And I'll bring sustain all the way to 0. And now if I attempt to play a note, we're not going to hear anything. You can see that I'm playing a note when this light up here lights up. That indicates that there's a MIDI note occurring. So the first control that I want to bring your attention to is sustain. That controls the overall level at which the note will sustain after it goes through the attack and decay stages of the envelope. Alright, so if I just hold the note down, I can control that sustain level just by increasing this parameter. In fact, I'm going to leave it at 50 because that will make it very apparent what the decay does, which is what I'll explain in a moment. But before I do the decay, I want to do the release. So right now, the way the sustain is working is as soon as I hold the note down, the attack is at 0 and the decay is at 0, so it quickly moves right into the sustain stage of the envelope, and then when I release the note, when I lift the key up, the note will stop and it will enter the release stage, which is also at 0 right now. If I increase that release stage, whenever I stop playing the note, lifting up on the key on the keyboard, you'll hear the effect that this release has on the tail of the sound. So right now, with release at 0, the sound stops abruptly. If I increase the release to say halfway, the sound fades. So a very fast release, a longer release, even longer. Okay? Now, the decay happens before it reaches the sustain stage. So what will happen is when we have notes start, it will move through the attack stage, which is going from 0 level all the way up to its maximum level. And then over the decay time, it will drop to the sustain level. Okay? So in this case, if I hold the note down, it's moving through the attack and decay almost basically instantaneously because those are at 0. But if I bring the decay up, let's say to 50, watch the level meter over here. You see how it's hitting a high level and then gradually dropping down to another level, a lower level, dropping down to a lower level, and sustaining at that level. Well, that lower level is the sustain level. Okay, so watch. If I lower the sustain level to say 0, watch what happens over here. Now I have the note held down the entire time. I still am holding the note down right now. So it hits that max level, and that maximum level right there is controlled by this volume level over here. Okay? So if I raise that to a 100, then that max level is going to be even louder. So what's happening is, over the attack time, which right now is 0, as soon as I hit the key, hold the key down and the note start occurs, it rapidly goes up to its maximum level. Then it drops down to the sustain level, which in this case is 0. So I can bring this back up, let's say to 32, or even lower. Let's just have it down here. So over the decay time, it's going to drop from the max level. It's going to drop down to the sustain level, which will probably be around here somewhere. So let's see that. I'll hold the note down the entire time. Okay. So hopefully that has cleared up what decay does relative to sustain. And then if I bring up the attack, let's make the attack take longer. So I'll bring the attack up to 50, let's say. So now it's going to take longer for the sound to go from 0 up to that maximum level. Alright, I can make it even longer. Also notice how it came up in level. It kind of came up fast, but then as it got closer and closer to that max level, it started to slow down. And that's a result of the particular envelope shape. In this case, it's quadric, and that indicates that it has a convex and concave shape based on whether we're talking about the attack, the decay, or the release. So it's more gradual, it's not linear. If it's linear, then it will go in a constant rate. And then this V slope, it's variable, so we can make it go between linear, which is in the middle, to a concave or convex shape, depending on what we're looking for. And what that will do is it will change the rate at which that attack setting occurs, whether it goes from 0 to loud quickly and then gradually gets closer to the max level, or if it stays lower longer and then finally rapidly approaches that maximum level with regard to the attack. Versus this. I have the note held down now. So just by changing the shape of the envelope, you can change the dynamic characteristic of the sound as well. Most of the sounds we're using are set to quadric. That explains the attack, decay, sustain, release envelope. And that pretty much covers the Initialize patch. So if you still have any questions about the Initialize patch, just leave them below the video and I will answer them. I'll see you in the next video.